Welcome to the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals videogram on abuse in relationships. And this video closely correlates with our anger management program itself. And in this video, we're going to take a closer look at what abuse is, the symptoms of the abused, and some of the ways that others abuse. Abuse in itself is any intentional words or behaviors that are meant to cause harm or take advantage of another person. It can be emotional as well as physical. And it, believe it or not, is not necessarily gender based. Women can abuse men as much as men can abuse women. However, unfortunately, in most cases, physical abuse against women is more prevalent just due to the biological factors that women are not as big as men. They are not as strong as men. These types of abuse that are physical and emotional can occur in the domestic home, between family members, between spouses, between parents and children. It can appear in the workplace with fellow employees or between employer and employee, and unfortunately, again, against women. Many of the physical abuses against women aren't just at the level of a stranger approaching a woman in a public place or through human trafficking, but sadly enough, it's through the abuse of an intimate partner or usually an ex-spouse. 736 million women suffer some type of abuse a year, and less than 40% call for help in these types of cases. And this can lead to an eventual rise in violence for the woman. For what originally maybe turned into her being smacked or hit, eventually turns into a more lethal encounter as the abuser becomes more bold. So it's very important to call 911 if physically threatened. As a woman, if you ever feel that you are at risk or about to be hurt, it's good to get out if possible of the home and to call 911 and not to wait and find out what happens later. So again, seeking help, finding help immediately is key in these cases. Now, unfortunately, emotional abuse is something that is very overlooked. Many individuals feel that if they are not being physically harmed, then the relationship itself is not abusive. This is farther from the truth, and this is where both genders play an equal role in possibly abusing each other. And over on the left side, we have a few types of ways that other individuals can abuse another person emotionally, whether it's a child, a spouse, a girlfriend or boyfriend, or even a fellow employee. Listed, we have shaming or putting down, and this isn't criticism, a legitimate type of criticism, but it is a way of putting down the other person, lowering their self-esteem, making not polite comments, maybe about the person's appearance or what they like to do, and making them feel overall bad about themselves. Blaming. Blaming is another way an abuser can make the other person more subservient to them through making it always their fault. The abuser very rarely takes any type of accountability for what has been done. Criticizing to hurt, almost like shaming in many ways, because the aim is to destroy the self-esteem. The abuser wants the individual to fall under their control. And by destroying the self-esteem of the other person loses the will to fight. Guilting, which is a form of manipulation. If a person who is being abused does not conform to what the other person wants, or does what the other person wants, or if they decide to go out on their own, they're immediately guilted, made to feel bad for a decision that went against the wishes and desires of the abuser. Humiliating, and this is where public embarrassment comes into play. Humiliating the other person so they feel not as good about themselves. Again, lowering the self-esteem and humiliating the person so they don't want to be seen in public. They don't want to go out anymore because of the embarrassment that the abuser has called. Ridiculing. Abusers classically call any name in the book to the person that they are abusing, and they will continue to name call and ridicule the individual. Dismissing. Dismissing is a show of a lack of respect towards one's partner, not allowing that person to feel good about any of their accomplishments. Accusing, and this is definitely what we refer to as gaslighting sometimes, and infidelity charges against an individual. Because usually the abuser is doing what is wrong, they automatically place that type of guilt upon their partner. So they will assume and accuse the other person of doing something when they do not, even on the smallest of charges. Neglecting, not meeting emotional and physical needs of one's partner. And this is classic of all abusers, and in many ways closely related to punishing. So the neglect of one's emotional and physical needs, especially in punishment, with terms of isolating the individual, silencing, not speaking to the individual, or what we refer to as the silent treatment, or taking away something. Abusers are also very much into invading one's privacy. They will monitor because they need to control, and they need to know what the other individual is doing. Gaslighting in the purest sense. Whenever something is told, a story is retold that might shed a poor light on the abuser, a total new story is created. The person who's being abused will then be yelled at or screamed at for even trying to put a shred of truth into the exact story itself. So gaslighting can almost make the person who's being abused feel like they're going crazy, because they then start to doubt their very self. And of course, controlling, looking to control an individual, to dominate an individual. The individual needs permission to go anywhere. And if they don't, again, we start to see the criticizing, the guilting, the humiliating. So it is a series of things that abusers do to emotionally control the individual, to emotionally belittle the individual by lowering that self-esteem so that their self-esteem is risen and can control and dominate. And that's very much what emotional abuse is about. Many cases also involve the emotional abuser using the legal system against an individual, prompting various charges and threats, and basically putting the other person again under their thumb through threat of illegitimate legal actions, charges, and so forth. Signs of emotional abuse include social withdrawal. Naturally, the individual who's being abused no longer wants to be in the public sphere. They don't feel good about themselves. They feel like they are not good enough for other people's attention. The abuser has managed to make the person feel guilty if they do anything in public, and they fear being punished or silenced if they actually do go out and do something maybe for themselves for a particular night. So there is a sign of social withdrawal. Low self-esteem is a natural result of these ridicules, name callings, and humiliations that these individuals endure. So someone who is being abused is losing their former identity because they're giving it up to please the abuser, him or herself. An individual who's being emotionally abused also is constantly in fear that one little thing may upset the abuser, and they don't want to cause a confrontation. And this pushes them into a constant state of anxiety and fear of displeasing the other. And through much of this, many individuals who are emotionally abused become very codependent upon the other person. The abuser, through all of these actions, makes the individual more emotional, financially, and socially dependent only upon them. so they have nowhere else to go with any of their problems. Those abused also experience many physical and mental symptoms, physical symptoms such as lack of sleep or bad eating habits, and mental conditions such as high anxiety or also depression itself. So when individuals unfortunately fall into these types of relationships with physical or emotional abusers, the big question is, why do these individuals abuse? Because they want to control. They want to compensate for whatever past or pathology that is tormenting them. Usually the other person is a object that makes them feel better for whatever happened in the past. I think one of the biggest things is individuals try to fix abusers. They feel if they stay with them, they can help them. They feel if they stay with them, they can help them become better people and overcome whatever is within their past. And this is a misconception on their part, because most of these individuals cannot be helped unless they want to help themselves, unless they wish to go to therapy, unless they wish to address the behavior that they're exhibiting and try to alter it or try to change it. Unfortunately, many of the pathologies that exist within these individuals prevent them from this type of change in itself. Also, the individual feels responsible if they leave. They are guilted and they feel, if I leave, and what if something happens to the abuser? And they feel this complete responsibility, this huge, huge mountain on their shoulder that they feel is their responsibility to save this person. And again, when you're dealing with an abuser, these are things that need to be dismissed. Most of the reasons why individuals abuse is through substance abuse. They could be recycling abuse that occurred to them. They could have various personality disorders, such as narcissism, where they only put themselves first. So they could be sociopathic, where they really do not even have a conscience. They could be dealing with a variety of anger issues. They could have a variety of insecurities and also attachment disorders, where they feel the need to control. And they may also have many, many inner jealousies that they may push upon another individual. So it's very important, if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, whether physically or emotionally, to try to remove yourself. If it's physical, especially because of the chance of it escalating and the chance of possible and chance of a possible death, even in the case of the violence that could be escalated against you. It could just go from a couple of bruises to a couple of broken bones to the chance of actually being taken to the morgue itself. And I don't think many individuals think someone that they think who loves them could do this, but it definitely can happen. So it's important to report this type of abuse to the national hotline. And that national hotline for domestic and national for domestic violence is 1-800-799-SAFE, or you can visit the hotline.org, and we have that link there. So again, that's a national hotline for abuse, and it's definitely something you want to look into. If you are in an emotional abusive relationship, don't think that the emotional scars don't add up over time and can lead to depression and possible suicidal thoughts on your own. So it's important to get out of these types of relationships, no matter how hard it is. If you've given it a couple tries with counseling and therapy and you don't see change, it's important to make that move for your own emotional health. Many individuals who are narcissistic or sociopathic aren't going to change. And this is an unfortunate reality, and it's something that individuals need to remember, that these individuals that abuse, that have these types of personality disorders, have serious issues that usually are so deeply rooted, it's going to take intense therapy over time to change. And you have to really, the abused has to really consider how much are they willing to take before enough is enough itself. In regards just to anger, anger management is always a good way to try to change behaviors. AIHCP offers an anger management certification for those looking to help others control their anger. We have a link there. We also have our phone number at 330-652-7776 and our email at info@aihcp.org. I'd like to thank you for listening and have a good day.